Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome back to our way too in-depth guide to surviving Mars. So, I want to go more in-depth as to what exactly is going on in our little screen over here. So, let's talk about each of these traits a little bit more in-depth here. First of all, age groups here. This one's relatively self-explanatory. Essentially, if you've got a bunch of children running around, they'll grow up into youths or whatever, but for now, they're completely useless. The one good thing about them is they're very malleable. You'll be able to send them to the playground and send them to school, which is going to foster certain traits in them. And you can sort of dictate what sort of traits they're likely to have when they grow up. It's not a guarantee or anything like that, but it is something that you're capable of doing in this game. The youth is someone who's able to work. They only can work, though. They can't have children, which is, as you would hope. I mean, it's not accurate that they can't, because, teenagers are not exactly the kinds of people who don't seem to get into all sorts of trouble as far as that goes, but, they're not supposed to. Adults, on the other hand, adult colonists, they can work in all the buildings and they can have children. Middle-aged people, they can do all the work and they can have children. And then there's seniors who can't do any work and can't have children. So you've got this sort of productive range of youth, adults, and middle-aged people who are all capable of working, and then if you need to have children in your colony, there's adults and middle-aged people only. So generally speaking, I aim to bring youths and adults to the colony. The reason is that even though middle-aged people can do everything just as well as an adult can, they're getting to the point where they're going to be retiring very, very shortly. There is actually a breakthrough technology that makes it so that people don't ever stop working. They'll work through their senior years, and this is an amazingly powerful breakthrough because you can end up with waves of seniors in this game, which are going to cripple your colony to a certain extent there. And you end up having to make domes that are specifically designed just for seniors. This is a pretty rare breakthrough tech I've been finding. I think it's the Forever Young breakthrough. But unless you've got that, middle-aged people are really only going to last you for a little while before they turn into seniors and get shuffled off and do nothing for the next 10, 20 years while they're retired. So basically what you're hoping to get is a colony that's got a good distribution of these, because as the senior people die off, you want new children to sort of replace them, getting into the workforce as they retire and so on and so forth to keep your population steady. This doesn't happen in practice, and you're going to end up having to adjust it through either birth control policies or through new colonists or through whatever the hell. It's a little bit easier now, especially since you can have the domes interconnected to one another and make it so that people can work from one dome without having to shuffle and micromanage all your seniors from one building to another. It really is just a lot sort of simpler this way. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at our specializations. No specialization isn't actually as generic as you'd think, and this is something that you want in your colony. People with no specialization are not people that you don't need. They're people who will work in your grocery stores, your casinos, your other utilities and amenities there, and they'll make it so that everyone else is more comfortable. It's not just that the people with no specialization don't have a penalty when they're in there, it's that that's the people that you want in those buildings. You don't want to have a botanist in a grocery store or whatever. You don't want overqualified people in those sorts of positions. You want to have people with no specialization equal to the number of positions in those sorts of jobs. Next up, we got scientists, and you'll notice that we've also got a difference in interests here. People with no specialization have generic interests. They will go to anything sort of equally, but scientists are more likely to do gaming, and they're less likely to do shopping. Obviously, the scientists work in the research places and generate science, but the one thing that I don't like about them is that they prefer gaming, and the reason I don't like this is because it's a little bit difficult to get access to that cheaply. Both of them require electronic parts, which are the casino or the electronics shop or whatever. Both of those do require electronics, so you will be bleeding a lot more resources in keeping scientists really happy. The way I've sort of gone about it is I just don't really care if they're super happy or not. Realistically, they'll be fine. Next up are engineers. They prefer dining and social. These guys work in factories, so producing your machine parts, your polymers, and your whatever. These guys become increasingly important sort of as you go through the game. Officers, these guys do your security. They prefer exercise, which is actually a really good thing. I do find that that's useful. The only thing is that officers are not really that useful until sort of mid to late game, depending on sort of what you're doing. Security stops just aren't that necessary for a lot of it unless you've got high renegades set on or you've gotten a lot of sanity breaks causing an outbreak of renegades. Until then, you just generally speaking don't really need this. Geologists, these guys do the extractor buildings, they prefer drinking and are less likely to do relaxation. The only building that does drinking is the spacebar, which is a fairly easy to build building, but it's a very large one, so it's not really great early game in your small little dome there. It's not too hard to get though, so you can generally speaking put it in your second little dome, especially now that you can interconnect them. Botanists, these guys do your farms, fungal farms, even hydroponics farms, any of those they're going to be able to work on. They prefer luxury, which is the, I believe it's the casino and the art store, so they can prefer those, and they're less likely to do social. And then there's medics who prefer luxury and do not like relaxation. They work in your medical clinics. So all of those jobs come with things that they prefer and a job that they're going to specialize in. Generally speaking, it's not too important to have exactly matching jobs, especially in the early game. I find it's better to sort of just flood the place because you're going to fill in all of those and have plenty of jobs open to spare. I did actually manage to get too many scientists in this game, which is quite rare for me, but in any event, let's go back here. Check out gender. This is, as you would expect, there's males, there's females, there's other. The only problem in this game is that like other doesn't really do anything perfectly, you know, for fairly obvious reasons, but only male-female pairings produce offspring, which is sort of what you're looking for in this game. I like how I've got a whole whack load of males that qualify and a whole bunch of females that don't. That's not really great, but anyway, yeah, so you just want to have enough of a balance going on here that you've got your population increasing as appropriate. So from there we got our perks. So workaholic, these people do just more work. They're better at it, they do more. This is a really quite decent trait there. The only problem is that it means they're less likely to do relaxation, and relaxation is one of the easier amenities to account for. So that's the only downside to that, but the plus 20 to work is really, really high. Survivor loses less health without food, water, oxygen, or when living in an underpowered dome. Maybe if you've got really high disasters in your particular playthrough, this could be a really decent trait, but even in those circumstances, you want to be making sure that you've got lots of water, food, oxygen, and, you know, power, because if you don't have those for very long, it doesn't matter if your thing's full of survivors, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of dead colonists anyway. So generally speaking, you're going to need to make sure that you've got those trait amenities for your colonists, survivors or not. So this isn't a great trait there. You could have a colony out nowhere and have it the one that gets shut off and just have all the people living in there be survivors, but realistically speaking, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. Next up, sexy and greatly increased birth rate. This is a fantastic trait there. Really, really nice to be able to have lots more people. Composed, all sanity losses are halved. This is a decent trait there. Ideally speaking, you don't lose sanity that often, but it does happen in this game. So since it's going to happen, you might as well have less of it. Next up is genius. I believe it's 100 research per soul for every genius. It's a very, very rare trait. It's a very powerful one. Next up, celebrity. It's sort of a similar thing, 1 million per soul, if I recall correctly. Again, an extremely powerful trait, especially if you can get a bunch of celebrities somehow. Very unlikely that you will, though. Saint, raises the morale of all religious people in the dome. Extremely, extremely potent if you've got lots of religious people. You can actually train people in your colony from birth to become religious. So it's a weird game in the sense that if you can get some saints, you do actually want to start bringing in religious people and training your people to be religious, which is a very strange thing for a game about space exploration. You wouldn't think that that sort of a scientific-y thing is going on there, but it does work. It is a good, decent build there. Religious, similarly, is actually quite good. Higher individual-based morale is a powerful ability, and low sanity never leads to suicide, which is also quite a nice little perk there. I don't think it's true, but, you know, whatever you want to say about it. The higher individual-based morale, though, means that they're much less likely to get in trouble, they're more likely to have children, they're more likely to be happy and productive, so it's just an all-around very, very powerful ability there. Gamer recovers more sanity when gaming, and they're more likely to do gaming. So this is a fairly decent one, other than the fact that gaming is a fairly expensive thing to do. Nerd gains a temporary morale boost every time a new technology is researched. The problem is that you don't go through technologies necessarily all that quickly. You do run out of technologies, and I do believe this does not apply to multiple researches of Mars grants, so you can't just get money over and over and over again to get a whole bunch of morale boost for your nerds. That I don't believe it works that way. As far as I've been able to tell, it doesn't seem to work that way. Next up is rugged. No comfort penalties when eating unprepared foods or having no residence. It's really easy to have prepared foods and having a residence, so this one's really not that important. If you end up with a humongous wave of homeless people and just want to kick them to the curb and have that work for you, then you're probably not going to have enough rugged people in the right place at the right time. Like, they'll probably still have some in homes and you'll have to micro it a lot. And realistically, just get more houses, get more restaurants, or get more grocers. It's not necessarily that hard. Next up is fit. More health recovered while resting, can work when health is low. Those benefits are not actually necessarily my favorite part of this. The favorite part of this is actually plus exercise, because exercise can be fulfilled in simple parks, and that includes the statues, the little fountains, and stuff like that. So you're always going to have access to the things that these people want, and since they're more likely to go off and do those sort of things, this is a really actually good perk for that. Enthusiast, increased performance boost when at high morale. This is a very, very good quality, and I do like it. You do have to have your colony up and running to the point where everyone's really quite comfortable, really quite happy, which does take some doing, but once you've got it set there and people are really happy to be there, this is a great blanket performance boost to everybody that has that sort of trait there. Hippie, gain twice as much comfort in gardens and parks. If this had plus gardens, it would be a really great bonus, but as it is, it's only a pretty decent one. People do tend to go to those sorts of places quite often anyway, and you can get them basically for free without using up any space, so you're always going to have some of these around. They're great buildings to have. I like the hanging gardens in a lot of places, so they'll have access to those as well. But the only thing is they're not necessarily going to go to those unless they really have to. Party animal gains additional comfort when satisfying social interest and plus social. This one is my favorite of the three that sort of increase in amenity type by itself, because not only are they more likely to go to that, but social is actually a fairly easy amenity to satisfy, so this one's a really quite good one to have. Let's go ahead and put back here, go to their flaws. Lazy, it's the opposite of hardworking. It's minus 20 at all jobs. This is actually quite detrimental. Lots of lazy people can actually make a workflow vastly worse just from their presence there. You definitely want to avoid this one wherever possible, and honestly as well, as far as I can tell, you can't get rid of it with sanatorium, so getting rid of this quality is not necessarily that easy. Chronic condition, loses health each day. That looks really bad, but it's actually not too terrible. They'll go to the health clinic. You just have to make sure you've got one, and you should have one in all of your resided in domes anyway, or have it available to them anyway, and they'll just go there and they'll just get themselves fixed up, and that'll be perfectly fine. Do avoid it, of course, if you can, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Idiot can cause a malfunction at workplace, 10% chance malfunctioning buildings stop working and require maintenance. This one's brutal. You will bleed so many resources if you've got lots of idiots. It sometimes is best to try and make it so that they're unemployed if you can do that. It's a really weird, crappy thing to have happen to you. Alcoholic, work performance lowered by 10, can be caused by sanity breakdowns, and they're more likely to go drinking. This one is just as bad as lazy, but unlike lazy, this one can be recovered with sanatorium, if I recall correctly. I have to double check, but I believe it can be. Gambler has a 50% chance to lose 20 sanity when visiting a casino. Can be caused by sanity breakdowns. You can get around this a little bit. If you've got lots of gamblers, you can just make it so that they don't have access to gambling. You move them to a dome, make sure the casino's nowhere near them, and they'll be perfectly fine. They are going to say that they wanted to gamble quite often, which is going to decrease their mood. But it's going to, at the very least, stop them from dropping humongous amounts of sanity constantly. This is another one that I'm pretty sure you can remove with the sanatorium as well anyway. Along with glutton, eats double rations. This one's actually not that bad. You should be able to get enough food to feed all of your people, plus a couple gluttons. If somehow you end up with an entire colony of gluttons, that of course would be pretty bad, but you're generally speaking just going to have a few of them. A handful of them is not really that big a problem. Hypochondriacs will randomly visit a medical building and take sanity damage if unable to do so. Just have medical buildings, there's really no reason not to. This one's not really that bad. Makes them more likely to go to a medical building just for the kicks of it, and that's fine, because they'll get comfort from doing so just like any other amenity. Whiner loses sanity when low in comfort, just like me. This one's kind of bad, kind of not. There are just times where it's going to be impossible to keep comfort high enough, so there will be times where these people lose sanity, but it's honestly not the end of the world when that's happening just a little bit. But if you're finding that's hard to keep your sanity high, or your comfort high consistently, then you're going to lose a ton of sanity off of a whiner. Melancholic, increased performance penalty when at low morale can be caused by sanity breakdowns. Again, like, this one's not as bad as whiner. When you're losing sanity, it can turn into that sort of snowball of gaining a whole bunch of other sanity conditions. Melancholic is just going to cause them to work a little bit more poorly, and then their mood recovers and they start working better, and that's perfectly fine. Or even they just, you sort of work at making their morale better, and there's no lasting damage to that. Whereas with a whiner, there's some real lasting damage if they take too much sanity hits. Loner, loses comfort every day while living in a dome with population over 30. This one's actually really hard to deal with. In some ways, if you want to make sure that these people are happy, they will, generally speaking, be gaining humongous morale penalties in typical sort of playthroughs. I've seen these people like 10, 15 lower on comfort just because I can't usually make domes specifically for loners with that few people. There's just really no point to it. Might be easier now that you can do the modular domes using I could just put in like one apartment or something like that and just have a bunch of businesses or something like that for the loners, but it really doesn't make a whole ton of sense to sort of cater to these guys. Just try and avoid them whenever possible. Coward, double sanity loss from disasters can be caused by sanity breakdowns. This one's kind of bad there. You're generally speaking going to have disasters happening and you're going to lose sanity from it. Hopefully it's happening infrequently enough that you can recover some of that sanity between them, even if they're cowards, but in a lot of cases you're going to wind up in situations where that could mean the difference between them gaining a negative trait or not. Also, if you're on a map with a lot of disasters naturally, that's obviously going to be a much bigger problem for you. I don't have particularly large amounts of disasters in this particular playthrough, so that's not a huge issue here, but Coward could be a really bad one if you've got the disasters set to high. So anyway, quirks are the last thing here. Guru. These people basically spread their traits around to other people, and this includes positive things and negative things. So if you've got a guru with a whole bunch of positive things, then great. If you've got a guru with a bunch of negative things, then not so great. Got tourists as well. They don't do anything. You can make them a real colonist if you have your comfort high enough, but even then I don't really ever bring in tourists. There's no point to it. Vegans, they don't do anything in this game since all the buildings are by default vegan. So that's all of these categories here. There's also the ability to review each individual person. Now, the reason I don't actually do this is because I don't really think that it matters that much. You can see the actual traits here of everybody and figure out what exactly they're about there. So this person's a hippie nerd who has no specialization. We got a botanist here who's a gamer. Like, realistically speaking, I just need people who can fill in whatever roles I need there. We got a rugged engineer and we got a party animal nerd engineer, which is a really weird combination. Yeah, so you could individually promote these people, make it so that they're bringing in these specific individuals, but honestly speaking, I just don't care enough. If you have the patience to go through the list of people and just sort of upvote or downvote people based on all of their different individual traits, like you decide that maybe a flaw, for example, like let's say I took away all these flaws here, hit the review button, now I've suddenly got a much larger list of people to go through here, and maybe I decide that this person here who's sexy and a whiner, maybe that's fine. They're a female adult with no specialization, like maybe I decide that that's actually okay, but honestly speaking, I don't generally feel like it's worth necessarily going through all of this stuff here unless you really need more people really badly. So why don't we go ahead and just take a look here. So like this person has a trait that's really good there and one that's kind of bad. Okay, so we'll go ahead and up say that one. Let's see here. Is that Portugal? I don't know what that country is. Let's see, they're rugged and they're melancholic. It's not really great. I don't need any more botanists either, so we don't need people with no specialization really that badly right now. We don't need scientists right now. We do need more geologists, so alcoholic and a loner, so that's a really bad combination there. Let's see here. Do need more medics. So we'll upvote you there, engineer there. Chronic condition, that's not too bad. Okay, whatever. A lot of scientists with flaws or whatever. All right, Mark Bertrand here. He's an alcoholic. That's alcoholic and a loner. That's a really bad combination there. Nerd, party animal, engineer. Okay, sure. Emmerich Berger, rugged. Okay, sure. And call it Alfred, hippie, rugged, gambler. 50%. We don't have any gambling, so that's fine. So all we've got is like 6 people that we've approved so far. That's not really that great. Alcoholic, that's actually okay. So we're bringing in a bunch of engineers, I guess. But as you can see, like, we haven't really... It's a lot of work, and I still haven't filled out the stupid ship yet. We've only got 7 as opposed to the 8 that I would have had before. Although that's admittedly because I'm being pickier than I would have been otherwise. But yeah, like, it's kind of hard to figure out why you would necessarily need to do this under normal circumstances, and I just don't feel like I really need to here. Just gonna wait till the rocket sort of refills its sort of possibility for passengers. So yeah, that's everything you need to know sort of about your passengers. The people I brought in, like, I'm perfectly happy with the combination that we've got right now. It's not ideal for the buildings that we have at the exact moment right now, because I do need to get some other stuff built, like another dome basically, but another dome and a whole bunch of factories, but it's broadly speaking fine here. So yeah, that's going to be our episode for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.